Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to type my phone number here while I'm waiting for you guys to tune in. How's everyone doing? Good morning, A Flavor. Come on in, guys. Just give me a minute. To Johnny, I'm doing great. Thank you. Morning, Afe. Just give me a second, y'all. I'm just trying to get this WhatsApp number in. 404. Okay. Thank you. I'm welcome. All right, guys. Good morning. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. If this is your first time, welcome as well. My name is Ayesha Chidole, and I'm an immigration lawyer. I represent clients all over the United States with their family immigration, humanitarian-based case, and we also handle removal cases and detention work. If you'd like to schedule a consultation, call us 407-995-6567. You can also call 678-325-1037, or you can send a WhatsApp to 404-333-8751. And if all else fails, you can click yes in the comments, and after the live, you can check your DM. It would have our contact information as well. Nash on Facebook, good morning to you. How are you doing? Proudly, Ivo Sophia says, good morning, attorney. God bless you for all you do. It gets hard sometimes, but the good Lord is your strength. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that love coming from you, because let me tell you, being an immigration lawyer or anything dealing with immigration right now is extremely exhausting, and it's extremely tough. And, immigration lawyers are the middlemen, if you would, where, we have to deal with attack coming left and right from both clients, prospective clients, from the USCIS, from the administration, and somehow we have to make it all balanced for everybody else. And it can be a lot, but we keep fighting the good fight. Most of us who practice law, and even certain areas of law, we're natural empaths, which basically means that we really care about the underdog, and we just really want to help people with legal pathways to a green card and citizenship, because we know that obviously being legal in a country like America can really change the trajectory of many people's lives. But, of course, comes with its challenge. And that's why it's really, really important that, when you guys are submitting these applications or looking to handle immigration cases, that, you are really dotting your I's and crossing your T's and making sure that you put in proper filings together, because you don't want to submit like frivolous applications or things that, you're not eligible for, that could potentially, affect you in the future. Okay, someone says, please answer my question, but I don't see your question. Good morning, Luck Tracy. How are you? Can an overstay with a pending VAWA fly domestically with a U.S. driver's license? Well, it depends. I don't know your own particular history, so I can't really answer. Do you have a work permit already? Is that what the basis in which you got your driver's license, or did you get your driver's license from a state that gives driver's license to prima facie? Do you have any criminal record? So I would need to know all of those things to be able to. My phone keeps like dragging down. I would need to know all of those things to be able to answer the question. Okay, let me see if I can get this to stay put. Okay. Someone says, I was convicted in my country for fraud and bribery. Now I have a family with a U.S. citizen. Can I get a green card, or is it impossible? Please help me with this. I mean, the answer is going to depend on how long ago it was. You're most likely going to need a 601A waiver for inadmissibility, not 601A, 601. I don't know if you're in the country or where you are. You're most likely going to need a waiver for inadmissibility. Sorry, guys, I got this new tripod to hold my phone, but it keeps my phone keeps slanting down. So we would need to know basically what it was, what country you're from, where exactly are you, which family member is filing for you, are you eligible for a waiver? Do you have a qualifying relative? So you see, this is an example of what I mean when I say, like, certain questions you guys ask online, it's unrealistic to answer that question without turning it into a consultation, because there are other people here and other information I want to share. So for those types of questions, it makes sense for you to schedule a consultation, because that's something deeply personal that I would imagine that you don't want to talk about your criminal record and history on here. So schedule a consultation, and we can discuss, what options might be available to you, if any. What would be your advice to someone who has been in the United States for 5 years and is filing for citizenship? So you're filing for citizenship. Are you a green card holder already? Have you had a green card for 5 years? Remember, it is not how long that you've been in the United States that determines your eligibility for citizenship. It is how long you have had your green card. So if you're saying that you've had your green card for 5 years and you're now eligible to file for citizenship, the advice that I would say, and this is not legal advice, so let me just repeat that. One of the things that you need to know is the elements of filing for citizenship, what makes you eligible. So outside of meeting the 5-year timeline, you want to make sure that you have good moral character. The good moral character window is going to be the last 5 years of good moral character. You don't have any crimes of moral turpitude. Sometimes USCIS can choose to go further back, but this is kind of like the vicinity of what it is that they're looking for most of the time. If you have a crime of moral turpitude, it can be a bit dicey. You want to make sure that you have paid your taxes, and that if you owe taxes, that you had already scheduled a payment plan that had been actively being paid well before you put in your application. Because if you create a payment plan to file, then it means that you're not really showing good moral character, that you're really only doing it because you're submitting, an application. The other thing is, if you have children that do not live in your household and they're your biological children, your stepchildren, or legally adopted children. See how I said legally adopted, not people that you're their guardian or caretaker, legally adopted, meaning there are court documents to show that you're the parent. If they are under 19 and they don't live in your household, you have to provide proof of how you support that child or those children from an eligibility standpoint. If you are male, you have to show that between the ages of 18 and 26 that you registered for selective service, for the military. Now, if you are now over 30, at the time of filing, there usually is some sort of exemption if you didn't register because you've kind of like passed the age. But if you're under that age, you have to have had that registration. And typically in a consult, like sometimes people will come to a consultation and they'll say they don't know if they registered. I'm usually able to check that for you. You can also Google it, because I don't have the address on my head in my head right now. But you can also check on the Selective Service website by typing in some of your credentials, and it will tell you if you registered or not. And then, of course, the final thing is that you want to make sure that with your travel internationally, that you haven't traveled for more than the time required. You have to have been here for half of those 5 years. So 2.5 years of your time as a green card holder has to have been in America. And if you have any travel that's more than 6 months, you really have to be able to provide documentation showing that you never intended to abandon your residency and that you've continued to maintain everything here in the United States. It's just that you were out for whatever reason that you were out for. If you've traveled for more than a year, basically you've broken continuity of your residency, and you basically have to start recounting again. So those are some of the things that you're going to want to take into consideration to match the element. If you feel that you fall under that, then you should absolutely be filing for citizenship. I cannot imagine someone who's eligible for citizenship that will just be sitting down and just not filing for citizenship, and then of course, this part, once you file for citizenship, you just have to be aware that you are going to have to take a civics test. And basically, that's testing your knowledge of the United States history. Usually, there are 128 questions. Of those 128 questions, you're going to be asked 20 questions. If you get the first 12 correctly, they will stop. Basically, once you hit 12 correctly, they will stop asking you out of that 20. Some people ask, what if I fail the questions? What if I fail some of the questions, but I pass everything else? If you fail some of the questions and you pass everything else, or maybe you fail the written part, or the reading part, USCIS will typically reschedule you for another interview in 90 days, giving you the opportunity to come back and retake it. So if you know that you're someone that maybe English is not your first language, you just have a hard time remembering things or whatever it is, there are many courses, people that offer like virtual remote courses or maybe even in-person courses that kind of teach you, how to read and write certain things as it pertains to the civics portion of U.S. citizenship test. The questions are pretty basic. If you are a basic English speaker, you should be able to answer it. It could be like, who lives in the White House? It could be the question. And all you have to type is, President Trump lives in the White House, or who is the president, so it's like a simple sentence, one of the tips that I give people studying, like if you're someone that has a hard time studying, or remembering so much, especially, those that are older. I know sometimes it can be a bit of a challenge. One of the things that I suggest you do is that there are going to be some questions in the U.S. citizenship application or questions that you already know the answer to. Like if they ask you to name like 2 public holidays, everybody can name 2 public holidays, Christmas and New Year, right? Or Thanksgiving or Labor Day or July 4th, or if they ask you who's the president of the United States, you can name that. Who's the vice president? You can probably name that. So what you should do is, first of all, focus on the questions that you truly don't know the answer to. And then once you focus on the questions you truly don't have the answer to, and you have a good grasp of that, then you go back and review. Most people are most challenged for the citizenship test in the areas of the World War and American history and government, like the government portion, like, the Senate, Congress. So those are good things to know. And then you should know the senators for your state, because sometimes they may ask you who the senator is. You should know your state governor as well. So like, trying to learn. So it's not a hard test to pass, honestly. It's just a matter of just focus, study. For it. So that's the answer to Shami Skin's question. Okay, let's see what else y'all got. Sorry, guys, I'm just kind of going through. I see some repetitive questions I already answered. Of our cases included on the pause, there are no case types included in any pause. The pauses are for countries, not case types. So if you have, or are you talking about the green card approvals? Is that what you're referring to? If that's what you're referring to, the pause for the fingerprinting are for green cards and citizenship, if that's the question I think you're asking. But if you're talking about the country pauses, those are not attached to a case type. They're just attached to the country pauses, and those pauses where it's an adjudicative hold, meaning like there's a delayed review of those cases, those will relate to work permits and actual green cards, regardless of what case type you are filing, So Angela Dickinson said, "Good morning, Lawyer Ayesha. I did call your office and I did a consultation. Thanks a lot. Sorry I didn't get to talk to you, though." That's fine. I'm sure you spoke to one of our amazing immigration attorneys that work for us. So doesn't matter. We all work in tandem here. We have other competent lawyers. So sometimes, I'm not available. I might be, in another consult, or I might be at, USCIS, or, wherever. But we have amazing attorneys that work here who care deeply about, our clients and immigration, and are very knowledgeable as well. Okay, let's see. Fitness Factory say no work permit, driver's license received with biometrics and receipts. No, I think you're the one who asked a question about travel and domestically. I would not. I would wait until you get your work permit before you do that, assuming you don't have any criminal records. Okay, let's see what else. How long will it take my green card? How long will it take to get my green card if I file based on a marriage-based case? So I will tell you guys right now, marriage-based cases are moving very, very quickly. Very, very quickly, meaning we're submitting files from February that are getting scheduled right now in May. We're submitting files from September. Basically, we're seeing on average somewhere between 6 to 8 months before people are scheduled for an interview. So prior to this pause on April 27th, where they were running fingerprints, those cases were getting approved as quickly as that. Now with the fingerprinting, I don't yet know, because we've not yet seen any fingerprinting, any 485s post interview. We've just seen I-130 approvals while we're waiting on those fingerprints. So I can't really give you a timeline. USCIS told you the normal timeline is 6 to 13 months on average when you have a marriage-based case. That is average before you can say, oh, my file has been out too long, what's going on? But that said, they definitely are scheduling people very early, even much earlier than before they get their work permits. So work permits is an area that I'll say is taking a longer time. Like I am seeing, I always used to say that, work permits can take 6 to 11 months. I am seeing more on average, most people getting those work permits between 9 to 10 months. I was looking at the work permit that we got in the office today just to check a timeline, and it was 10 months from submission. And that's what I'm seeing. And, I think that a lot of it also has to do with last year, where we had an immense amount of delay in receiving receipt notices. Like an immense amount of delay. If you don't have a receipt notice, you can't do biometrics. If you don't do biometrics, you can't get a work permit. So I really think that had an impact on it. Now USCIS writes on their tracker that the average is 10.5 months to get a work permit. And I will say that seems to be realistic based on what it is that we're seeing. These timelines, they evolve. No lawyer has control of this. So please take it easy with your lawyers or people that you're demanding, where's my work permit? We don't have control. We don't approve or process cases. Our job is to submit those filings, but ultimately USCIS has control to give you receipts and give you work permits. So that's something that is definitely, I would say, more delayed, but those interviews are being scheduled much quicker. And then for those of you who have VAWA applications, we're definitely seeing more I-360 interviews, people with I-360 applications being interviewed. In the past, usually once they make a decision, let's say they approve your VAWA, they will send you to for an interview for your 485. But now we're seeing sporadic, and then they did like a test run, in December of 2024, where they did some interviews from VAWA interviews. I know in our office we got like 2, or whatever it is. But I will say that, we're definitely seeing at least 1 interview every other week being scheduled now for the I-360. That's the VAWA portion. So what they do is if you have a VAWA application and an I-485, you can be selected to for an interview, to do both interviews. So it's really, really important that you remember whatever it is that you submitted in your filing. They're going to be asking a lot of details about that. They're going to be asking a lot of details about who prepared your case, how your case was prepared, all of these things. So you want to really make sure that you are prepared for those interviews and prepared to give your testimony of what happened in your marriage, because even though you have your declaration, your personal statement, USCIS is going to want to take an oral testimony. It's similar to an I-751 interview, where if you go to an I-751 interview and you're requesting a waiver, where USCIS will typically ask you your testimony right there and type it right there, and then have you sign saying that this is your testimony. You will have the opportunity to restate your testimony again of what happened in your marriage. So expect that these interviews last a bit longer than normal, just because they're covering quite a bit of ground, on that, including typing up your testimony. So the ones that, I've attended have taken about 2 to 3 hours, basically. That's how long they're taking. Okay. Let's see. Thank you so much, Amoye, appreciate it. Nilechi, is it advisable to change your last name to your husband's now? She got her green card through VAWA. Nilechi, it's really up to you. Like, that is a personal decision. Changing your name has nothing to do with your immigration application. We're in 2026. So some people choose to take their spouse's last name. Some people choose not to because of, maybe the logistics or just the process of change and all of those things. You don't feel like doing it. But if the question is whether changing your name to your spouse's last name impacts your immigration application, it doesn't. But you just want to make sure that if you change your name, that you're covering all your documentation, that you're making sure that all your documentation is uniform across the board, so that you don't have a challenge if you're traveling. And if you're traveling, let's say you've changed it to your husband's last name and some of the documents are still not consistent, you want to make sure that you always travel with your marriage certificate, so that they know, that that's why your name is different. All right, someone's saying, let's see, someone's saying, I filed for VAWA in 2024. I got my travel documents, but I didn't get my work permit. Do you know how long? Well, I don't know if you filed, did you file an I-765? Did you select the right category? So those are some questions that I would want to know. Was the right category selected in your 765? I also want to know, what country are you from? Because all those things would be the variable. But again, when you guys have this deeply personal questions that requires a lot of digging in, stop asking those questions online. Schedule a consultation so we can look at your documents. Let's see what you submitted and say, well, this is what should happen. I can't tell you how many times people have come on live or eventually booked a consult and said to me, oh, I never got a work permit for this or whatever it is. And I'm like, okay, let's see the document. And then they selected the wrong category, right? Or they submitted a 360. If I don't know, I think you said yours is for VAWA. Like they select a C31 or a C14 or whatever. So I need to see that, to be able to assess, what the issue is and whether it's time for you to do that inquiry to find out what's the delay, and also knowing what country you're from. Do persons have to do interviews for the I-751s as they did to get 2-year green cards? Yes, you should absolutely expect to do an interview. Sometimes USCIS will not do the interview, we'll skip an interview. I mean, in this current administration, it's very few and far between. Like when I think about our clients that they've had their interviews skipped in this administration for 751s, I mean, the evidence is so overwhelmingly so much. There's just so much evidence, for them to skip it. But otherwise, you should fully prepare to be interviewed. And then if you were someone who got a green card, a 2-year green card, without being interviewed for your 2-year green card, you should fully expect to be interviewed for your I-751, whether that's a joint filing with your spouse or whether you're requesting a waiver in one of the 3 grounds, whether that's based on divorce, So, well, there are 4 grounds, but most people will do divorce, extreme cruelty, or death. There's also extreme hardship. So if you're selecting one of those grounds, you should expect to be interviewed. And those interviews, again, as I said, you can go to these interviews unprepared. Like, I don't know how I can, I wish you guys would be like a fly on the wall in this interview. Like, you really need to be prepared, because some of those interviews are very adversarial, like, basically they're looking for a crack. So you really need to be able to articulate why you and your spouse are not together and why you're now filing this. And that applies to any kind of application where your spouse is no longer involved. Like I said, with VAWA, if you're scheduled for a VAWA interview, now you got to articulate that if you're one of those people selected for it. So, it's just really about being prepared and ready to answer the question, going through, obviously, for a lot of people, with VAWA cases, going back to VAWA cases for a second, or even 751s, because these cases take a long time to process, right? 3 years, 4 years. So it's been a long time, right? So that's why you should always go back and refresh your application, and review your applications before, you attend your interview, so you can remember everything, or however you refresh your memory. Just prepare for your interviews. Same thing in a marriage-based case. If you file a marriage-based case, you should be reviewing your application. You should be preparing with your spouse, because listen, people can be married for like so many years, and they can still be tripped up. I'm going to give you guys a funny story, an example. I'm going to make fun of my husband here for a second here. So yesterday I was doing a prep session with a client who has an interview, and we were in the 2 couple were on Zoom in their bedroom, and the color of the wall was gray. And I said, what color is the wall? And the guy was like, white. And me and the wife would look like, are you okay? The color of the wall is gray. He's like, oh my God, this is white. And so he's like arguing with us, and we're like, no, this wall is gray. And, I showed them, I had like that same morning, which was yesterday, I had asked my husband, my husband is 17 years this year, and he knows that I hate any green mint. I only like mints that are blue, and I had to ask him to help me buy one. And so I showed them, I said, I specifically said, please don't buy me a green mint. And what did he come with? A green mint, because he thought it was blue. So the point is, and, obviously we're legitimately married, and we've been married a long time, but we see colors differently. And so that's what I mean when I say, you need to prepare, and you need to practice. You need to go over your applications, no matter what you're doing. It's like if you have a job, you need to research the company, right? You need to prepare for interview questions to attend that job interview. If you have a test, you need to study for your test. If you have an N400, you need to study for it. So that's pretty much, the spiel of that. I got to jump off right now because I have a consultation, but I will be back on live tomorrow at 10 o'clock. If you have a specific question, schedule a consultation. Stop asking random questions online that you can't get the proper answer to. Our phone number here is 407-995-6567. It's also, you can also call 678-325-1037, or send a message on WhatsApp to 404-333-8751. All right, guys, I will talk to y'all tomorrow, okay? Bye.